Hey, it's Andrew at BTO Range here in Conroe, Texas, and today, one of my favorite 22 rifles. Of course, I think we've probably established by now I'm a Remington guy, but this is one of my favorite 22 rifles that was ever produced. The Remington Nylon 66 22 long rifle, semi-automatic rifle. Neat little story behind this gun, and they've proven, at least now, since they've been discontinued, to be an exceptionally collectible model, and there's plenty of variants in the Nylon series to make a decent collection out of. And we'll talk about that as we go on. And there's some rare variants, and then there's some super rare variants that can bring in the thousands of dollars. So Wayne Leake, L-E-E-K, he's kind of the main design engineer behind this Nylon 66 model. And we've talked about him before in the XP100 video, because there's a lot of similar styling there between this rifle, which came before the XP100, and then that pistol that came after this. So you see a lot of the commonality in the design features and the aesthetic between those models. He also had part of the Remington 600 rifle and a few of their other models, but he was one of the driving forces behind this. So in the late 40s, early 50s, Remington really didn't have what they considered a mid-priced, user-friendly, general-purpose 22 long rifle. And what they wanted to do is develop a gun that would be sub 5 pounds, that would be very dependable, that would be almost impervious to weather conditions. So they wanted to kind of set the bar high, but still keep a manageable price. So in the early 50s, they start designing a gun to do that, and they sent the design parameters as far as what they wanted the gun to do durability-wise, including things like fire resistance and submersion resistance and all these other things, to the people at DuPont. Now, during that time period, Remington was owned by DuPont. Remington was a DuPont company, so it was kind of keeping it in the family. So in 1955, the people at DuPont were developing a series of synthetic composite plastics, if you will, for lack of a better term. So there was, they developed a formulation called Zytel 101, and that's what this is, Zytel 101. Then they developed the Nylon name, or went into the Nylon name. This was polyamide 6-6. Bunch of chemists, chemists being chemists. Polyamide 6-6. It became fiber 66, and then nylon 66 eventually. But first, it was actually called something different. When they first developed the prototype rifles, and they were doing a lot of endurance testings in 56, 57, and 58, the gun was originally going to be called the Model 555 Bearcat, B-E-A-R-C-A-T, the Model 555 Bearcat. But in 1958, Ruger came out with a revolver called the Bearcat, so that was shelved. And somehow, and I really don't know the lore behind exactly how they determined to go with Nylon 66, but they did, and the rest, as they say, is history. So a big concern at the time was, this was in 1959 when this gun was launched. And in 58, while they were preparing for the launch of this gun, there was a lot of concern at Remington, particularly in the marketing department, that the gun was just a little too out there, a little too futuristic looking, and people were going to say, oh, it's a plastic gun, it's an air gun, it's all these different things that were going to negatively impact sales. So part of the design features of the gun was there's not really a receiver. The stock, this nylon stock, is in two pieces, a left and right half, that are clamshell together and fused. I mean, there's an obvious seam that runs throughout the gun where the stock is fused together left and right. And that actually also composes what would be the receiver of the firearm. This steel piece right here is really just a clamshell very thin clamshell that fits over that portion, I guess, of the nylon stock overall that houses the bolt and the trigger mechanism and things like that. So that posed a couple of legality issues about 10 years after this gun was designed. And we'll talk about that in just a second. But so they designed this clamshell steel metal feature, blued feature here, to make the gun look more like a traditional firearm, to help the public, I guess, accept this new radical gun that Remington was coming out with. So the gun also, there are some mechanical reasons to have this here. This holds the ejector in on the side, and they decided to rivet the rear sight to this clamshell receiver cover instead of dovetailing into the barrel. So there's some mechanical features to that. We're going to do a separate standalone video on the gunsmithing side of this channel where we take this gun apart, because it's a little unique on how to do that. And then there's some areas of this gun you probably don't want to do that. So we'll get into that in a separate video. But there's some mechanical reasons to have that there, but it was mainly there to help the public accept this gun, and where it wouldn't be just completely all, Buck Rogers in the 21st century type thing. So they also had a man worked at Remington. He was one of their manufacturer's reps by the name of Tom Fry, F-R-Y-E, Tom Fry. And in 1959, he had a marathon exhibition shooting session with 5 nylon 66s. I believe it was 5 nylon 66s. It might have just been 3. But over the course of 13 days, 9 hours a day, with helpers, I think he had 5 or 6 helpers. They had 2.5-inch cube blocks of pine wood, 2.5-inch every direction of pine blocks, and the helpers would throw them in the air, and Tom would shoot them with a nylon 66. 9 hours a day, 13 days. With only occasional breaks every 6,000 rounds to brush off the bolt face, just a very basic field strip, brush off the bolt face, kind of just do a very minimal cleaning, no in-depth cleaning of the gun. So 100,010 of these wooden blocks were shot. The people would throw them up in the air, and Tom would shoot them 100,010, 100,010 of these blocks, and he only missed 6. 9 hours a day for 13 days. And there's an interesting picture, and I think we've got it, where there's this huge pile of these blocks and Tom's sitting on top of them. But he was a pretty renowned exhibition shooter for Remington. And prior to that time, a man by the name of Ed Topperwine, a Winchester exhibition shooter, had set a record of some 70,000 blocks years earlier with a Winchester rifle. And with this nylon 66, Tom Fry handily beat it by some 30-something thousand blocks. So, and that was marketed all over the place by Remington, saying this is a dependable rifle. And they had all types of hype on that. So, a very successful rifle. Over 1 million of these things were made from 1959 until 87. Now, 87, it depends on where you look. Some people say they were in production 89. Some people say as late as 91. There were some models made with parts cleanup after the bulk of nylon 66 production ceased in 87. There were a couple of models that continued past that, primarily with parts cleanup. So let's talk about what these were and some of the timeline of this. So the big thing about nylon 66 is the color of the stock and of the furniture. So this one is the most common. This is called the Mohawk Brown, with the walnut colored, I guess, if you will, stocks with the white diamonds. So this was called the Mohawk Brown. The most popular by far of that million-ish Remington nylon 66 production, 678,000 and some change were the Mohawk Brown. The next most common was the Apache Black. The Apache Black guns, they didn't start until 1962, and they ran to 83. So the Apache Black is an all black, the polymer, the plastic stock's all black, but the receiver cover and the barrel is chrome. It's bright, shiny chrome. Then the next most common is called the Black Diamond, which is 1978 through 1987. 50,600 and change of those were made. Those would be all black stocks. The diamonds are black and black metal. And then the rarest one of the true Nylon 66 versions are the Seneca Green. Seneca Green is a subtle olive drab green color to the stock. It's one of the two original colors when the gun debuted in '59. It was the Mohawk Brown and Seneca Green, but it only lasted 1959 through 1962, and just a little under 45,000 of those were made. So of the four Nylon 66 colors, the Seneca Green is the rarest. So they can bring a little bit of money. We'll talk about valuation in a minute, but they weren't satisfied with just making different colors. There were also different series of the guns. So in 1959, the two original colors came out. In '62, the Apache Black came out. In '63, they did a gallery special. Shooting galleries were still a thing at county fairs and carnivals, where you actually shot 22 shorts at the targets of the shooting galleries. So they made a version of that for that in 22 short only. So that was the gallery special of the Nylon 66 GS. So in '66, the 150th anniversary of Remington, they had some little under 3,800 of these guns had a commemorative oval embossing on it, where the 150th anniversary seal was. In '76, or rather in 1970, let's try to keep it in chronological order, but my notes are not. In 1970, this gun, the Nylon 66, is loaded through the rear with a tubular magazine. We'll go ahead and remove that. So it's loaded with a tubular magazine from the rear. There's no slot in the side, so you have to completely remove that, drop cartridges down in through the button, and then close the mag tube back in. But in 1970, the Nylon 77 was released, which is a box magazine, and before everybody's head explodes, Remington did in fact call it a clip. But they called it a clip magazine in their advertising, right? So all of you guys out there that really make a lot of noise about it's not a clip, it's a magazine, Remington called it both at the same time. So that was in 1970. In 1972, the Mohawk 10C came about, and that was basically the Nylon 77 for big box stores that lasted from '72 to '78. So in '78, you also had the 66 MB came out, and that just had a factory mounted 4-power scope, branded Universal on the top of it. And then it went on through the rest of production. The Apache Black gun dropped off. The chrome plate one dropped off in '83. The Seneca Green gun dropped off in '62. The Mohawk Brown and the Black Diamond lasted till the end of the run in '87. Now in '87, they did a cleanup of guns that they labeled the Apache 77. It wasn't labeled Nylon 66. It was an Apache 77. And that was a Kmart gun, specifically for Kmart. And it had an OD green stock, similar to the old Seneca Green guns. So, and it may have been Seneca Green stocks because that was not a very popular color for Remington at all. So they were Kmart guns, but there were like almost 55,000 of those guns made. Now, where we run into issues with that is people will think they have the rarer Nylon 66 Seneca Green gun, the early gun, when in fact they have the Apache. And the easy way to tell is on the bottom of the gun, on the grip cap, it'll have that Apache 77 mark instead of the Nylon 66 mark that you want to see. So if you're looking at what somebody is marketing to you as a Seneca Green Nylon 66, there are two, I don't want to say copies because the Apache 77 is a unique model of Remington. It's not considered specifically a Nylon 66. But there is another one produced much later after the Remington was discontinued, CBC in Brazil, associated with Rossi Firearms. made a nylon 66 copy in a variant of configurations, and one of which had a green stock. So you'll see those CBC guns, and they don't try to mark them nylon 66. They don't copy Remington markings. They're marked as to what they are. But from across the room, it looks like a nylon 66, or even across the table, it looks like a nylon 66, until you actually look at the roll marks on the rifle. So pay attention if somebody is offering you a rare nylon 66, and make sure that it is in fact a nylon 66. So other than the nylon 66, there are other guns in the nylon family. There was the lever action gun, the nylon 76, called the Trailmaster, a lever action gun. And they were made from 62 to 65, 1962, 1965. So they were made in both the Mohawk brown configuration and the Apache black configuration. So there are chrome ones. But there are only about 1,600 of the Apache black nylon 76 guns made. So that is one of those ultra rare niche nylon Remington 22s that actually bring fairly significant money in the marketplace. You'll see those actually trading over the $2,000 mark in decent condition fairly regularly. And there were bolt guns. There was the nylon 10, which was a single shot bolt gun. The Model 11, which had a box magazine, and the Nylon 11, and then the Nylon 12, which had a tube magazine bolt action repeater. And between all the three bolt action guns and the lever action guns, about 60,000 were made. So they're not super rare, but they're certainly not common. And some of them are less common than others. For example, in the Model 10, the Nylon 10 series, they made a smoothbore designed for the 22 long rifle shot cartridge, the Model 10 SB. And they are ultra rare, and clean examples of those rifles can bring $4,000 pretty easily when offered for sale. So as you can see, the niche collectibles in this nylon 66 are worth looking out for. And unless you're, I don't know, I guess it's still possible you may find one on the wall of the local pawn shop, or somebody cleaning out somebody's attic or whatever comes across one of these ultra rare nylon variants. And if so, you may be able to pick it up at a really big bargain. So, but most of those are found, I would imagine. So you're going to have to pay up for them when you find them. So when we evaluate a nylon 66, there are some things that we're going to look for. And it's the same three things we always talk about: originality, scarcity, and condition. So, and we talked about the scarcity part a little bit already. The Mohawk brown is the most common. It's the one you're most likely to see. But having said that, there are some super rare variants of this rifle that bring a ton of money. So learn how to identify which exact model of nylon 66 you're looking at, and learn how to tell if it's a real one or not. And we've discussed that a little bit. So originality. So I don't know. It is possible. It is possible to take a Mohawk brown gun and put a black diamond stock on it, or a CBC blacked out stock on it. And it would take a pretty good eye to tell those apart. So they can be faked. Certainly not ethical to do that, but they can be faked. So, and it's almost impossible to get any kind of substantiation from the current rim arms as to how a particular black diamond would have left the factory. So that may be a little challenging. You may have to get a hold of somebody that really knows nylon 66s to determine, if there's a question, to determine if the gun is a legitimate. And it may be worth doing if you're talking about one of these variants that get into the thousands of dollars. So how do you date them? The serial numbers, these guns were not serialized until October of 67. In October of 67, kind of the handwriting was on the wall that the Gun Control Act of 68 was going to be passed. So Remington began serializing these guns on the bottom of the barrel right here ahead of the fore-end tip. and they started with around with serial number 400,000. And they did, about 19, a little under 20,000 of those guns were serialized there. And then they moved the serial number to the receiver, to this receiver cover, I guess is probably a better term. And I think what was it, December of, in October of 67 is when they started doing that. And then in December of 68, remember the Gun Control Act went into effect in January of 69. They changed the serial range to 2.1 million and started from there. And then later on, they started adding letter prefixes to it. But the serial numbers really, other than giving you a general idea of when the gun was made within a block of years, the barrel codes, typically like most other Remington firearms in that era, the barrel codes will tell the tale. This particular gun has a barrel code of B and O, the B corresponding to the month of May and the O corresponding, in this case, to 1977. So we're confident that this is a May of 1977 gun. Of course, the Mohawk Brown guns, they lasted the entire production run of the rifle. So what would make a difference, or what can tell you that there's been some shenanigans going on, is if your barrel codes don't match the years when that particular rifle was made. For example, if you have a gun being promoted to you as a Seneca Green gun with barrel codes after 1962, it can't be a Seneca Green gun because they weren't produced after 62. So that little bit of pre-knowledge, when you start thinking about spending $1,000 plus or $2,000 plus on a nylon 66, is certainly worth having. So mechanically, what goes wrong with these guns? These guns the stocks had a lifetime warranty from Remington for many years. It doesn't apply now. But there was like a sticker, oval sticker on the stock that said, if this stock ever chips, cracks, fades, splits, or anything, send it to us. We'll replace the gun free, or we'll replace the stock free. And it's unusual it's a tough material. It's unusual for that to happen, but I have seen these seams split, particularly here on the underside of the buttstock. I have seen a few instances where that seam splits. I don't know of a good way to repair that. And the stocks for these guns, they're available from parts guns that have been cannibalized and sold off for parts. But you would expect to pay a couple of $100 just for the stock. So to me, a Mohawk Brown with a split stock, I'm not going to buy it for a whole lot of money at all, because I know I'm going to have to spend a few $100 just to get the gun back together. What's more common is this charging handle. Make sure we're clear, and we are. What's more common is this charging handle gets lost because it just pulls straight out of the gun. And it's a nylon part as well. And sometimes the good news is this one's pretty tight, but it'll pull straight out of the gun. And over time, it being nylon and the bolt being steel, that can get worn. These are being remanufactured. They're available from most from the big parts houses like Gun Parts Corp, a remanufactured version of this. Looks just like it. I don't know if I've installed them. I've bought them, installed them. It's a good idea to have a couple of those if you're going to be collecting nylon 66s or shooting them. Good idea to have a couple of those just in case. One of the the bigger problems is with this rear side assembly. This elevation screw gets lost, or worse, this rivet breaks, or the rear sight breaks right here at the rivet. That's a more difficult fix. This receiver cover is the serialized part of the gun. ATF recognizes that as the firearm itself. So that can be a little problematic with replacing the entire unit as a whole. This can be re-riveted. It's not going to look factory. And so take a look at, this is what the rivet's supposed to look like. It's a little rounded dome kind of thing. And when we do the gunsmithing video, we'll take a look at it on the inside. Underneath that, there's also a leaf spring that's holding the cartridge guide in place. So we'll take a look at all that in the gunsmithing video we'll do on this gun. So, and then of course the overall general condition. This front sight is typically readily available on the used parts market. It was used in a few different models, the exact same sight. Remington 572, 552, all the nylon guns the 600, the XP100. All of those used this particular sight, so they're out there. I've not seen much else except for rust. Now, rust is an issue on these guns for a couple of different reasons. The metal on this receiver cover is very, very thin. And if you think about the normal carry point of this gun when you're in the field, it's going to be right like that. So a lot of sweat, a lot of moisture collects on this receiver cover, and it starts to rust. And there's a little bit of very fine surface rust on this particular rifle receiver now. The issue is rebluing that is problematic. I've never known cold blue to take well on this thin metal. I'm not sure if it's an alloy thing or if it's the fact that it's kind of like a spring steel alloy that's bent to shape and then hot blued. I will tell you, I have hot blued a number of these guns over the years, and this metal is so thin that it's very, very difficult to polish. I don't even attempt to polish that on a wheel at all. There's just no way to do it without getting ripples in it, so we've always hand blocked those when we polish them to reblue them. And when you put them in the hot tank, they heat up so fast and they turn so fast that it's super, super easy to leave them in too long. You start getting a weird purplish hue to them, so you have to pull them out pretty quickly. So they're a little problematic in that regard. So they pit easily. The metal is very thin, and once it's pitted, it's done. There's really no way to, there's not enough room to do any kind of aggressive polishing or block sanding on it to make it look right again. So be careful with that. The chrome on the Apache Black, and it is chrome, they flake or can flake, and it looks really hideous when they start flaking, but it's really not cost effective to try to replate those in any way. So those are the things to look for in the Nylon 66. And again, when we start to take the gun apart, we'll show you how to field strip it and how to clean the hammer and the bolt. It's not an internal hammer, it's a sliding hammer on this gun. But I suggest looking for them. You still run into them because there's a million of them made. You'll typically run into this guy right here, the Mohawk Brown. This is a groove for a scope here. It's not a very well-defined groove like you would see on a receiver, because this was molded in when the receiver was formed. It wasn't cut with a mill. So the groove is kind of rounded, so you can get a good clamp on it. I mean, you can mount a scope to it with 3/8 dovetail mounts, but you'll find that impact can shift a little bit. You can change the zero of your scope by the amount of tension you put on these cover screws, and because it flexes the mount a little bit. So you can scope them. They're not going to be wondrously accurate when you do, but they're accurate enough. Let's put it that way. And they're hellaciously reliable. 100,000 pine blocks definitely showed that way back in 1959. So the Remington Nylon 66, there's a ton of information out there on the interwebs, folks. Great reading on this gun, great story behind it. Very, very fertile collectible field, and the Nylon series in general, between the 66, the 76, the 77, the 10, 11, 12, and the variations of those, and the 4 colors, and there's just, and I like that kind of stuff because there's always something I can be looking for, I guess. So anyway, that's the Nylon 66. If you like what we're doing, folks, please hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. I have learned that the bell is a notification button. If you want to get notified when we post a new video, please feel free to hit that. Leave a comment. Let us know what you think. If there's a model you want us to take a look out for, we're still looking for that Weatherproof Varmint Master. We're getting that comment. So we'll get that up as soon as we can get one of those guns. So like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks a lot.